The green truck and the Land Rover raced through the quiet countryside roads, heading toward Leatherslade Farm, the secret hideout the gang had chosen long before the robbery. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky was slowly turning from pitch black to a pale gray. The robbers knew they had very little time before police checkpoints started appearing on the roads. Inside the truck, the men sat among the piles of mailbags stuffed with cash. The air smelled of old paper and diesel. Despite the adrenaline, the exhaustion started catching up. One of the robbers leaned back and whispered, "Feels like a dream, doesn't it?" Another replied, "If this is a dream, I don't want to wake up." But Bruce Reynolds, riding ahead in the Land Rover, stayed focused. He knew that success didn't depend on getting the money. It depended on disappearing afterward without leaving a trace. Around 4:45 a.m., the vehicles finally reached Leatherslade Farm. The location was perfect, isolated, hidden behind trees with no neighboring houses for miles. The farm looked like any other countryside property, with a small stable, a barn, and a creaky farmhouse. But for the gang, it was now the most important place in Britain. The truck backed up to the barn door, and the men began unloading the heavy sacks. The sound of the bags hitting the wooden floor echoed in the silent barn. Soon, a mountain of green mailbags grew in the center. Each bag was filled with money, banknotes bundled tightly with paper bands, some so old they were almost falling apart. The gang had just stolen more than $2.6 million, equivalent to over $50 million today. Inside the farmhouse, the men were tired but ecstatic. Someone opened a bottle of beer, but Bruce immediately stopped him. "No celebrating yet," he said. "We're not safe, not even close." He was right. Police would soon discover the empty train, the missing coach, and the fake signal. And once they realized the scale of the theft, they would mobilize the largest manhunt in British history. As the sun began to rise, the gang gathered around the long wooden table inside the farmhouse. The room was filled with cash bags. Before them was the most time-consuming part of the plan, sorting and counting the money. They needed to divide the notes, remove marked bills, and organize the final shares. They had brought along a retired army officer, known as the Ulsterman, to help manage the counting operation. For the next several hours, the farmhouse buzzed with activity. Cash was emptied onto the table in huge piles. Bundles were sorted by value, $1 notes, 5 notes, and 10 notes. Men sat in chairs, counting stacks by hand, forming neat piles and writing totals on notepads. It was slow, repetitive, and exhausting, but the excitement made it feel unreal. In the middle of counting, one of the younger gang members laughed and said, "I've never held this much money in all my life." Another answered, "You're holding more than the Bank of England right now." Meanwhile, miles away near Bridigo Bridge, police officers were swarming the scene. They inspected the tracks, the signals, and the empty mail coach. The moment the investigators saw the fake glove-covered glove on the signal, they realized they were dealing with professionals. More units arrived. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters were prepared. Scotland Yard was notified. By late morning, the robbery was headline news across the country. Detectives began piecing together the sequence of events. They knew the robbers had to dump the bags somewhere. They also suspected the group had used a nearby hideout. They spread out, scanning farms, barns, and empty buildings within a large radius. The net was slowly tightening. Back at Leatherslade Farm, the gang continued counting, unaware that their biggest mistake had already been made, staying at the hideout far longer than planned. The original idea was simple: count the money quickly, leave by sunrise, and wipe the farm clean of fingerprints. But the enormous amount of cash slowed them down. Instead of a few hours, they needed days. By noon, they finally finished counting. The total was staggering: over $2.6 million stolen in less than 30 minutes. Spirits were high, and someone joked about retiring on a beach. But Bruce called everyone together. "Listen," he said firmly, "this is the most dangerous moment. We have the money, but if they catch us now, it means nothing. We must leave and destroy every trace that leads back here." The plan was to burn the farmhouse, wipe the fingerprints, and vanish separately. But before they could act, the gang debated. Some argued to rest a few hours. Others pushed for leaving immediately. The disagreement created delays that would cost them dearly. As they prepared to leave, one of the men suggested calling a trusted associate to help clean the farmhouse later. It seemed like a small idea, but it was a fatal mistake. This associate would soon panic, leave evidence behind, and lead the police straight to Leatherslade Farm. By the evening of August 8th, the robbers were convinced they had pulled off the perfect crime. They left the farmhouse, leaving behind the empty mailbags, bedding, food wrappers, and newspapers, everyday items that seemed harmless. But to the police, they would become clues. Clues that would slowly unravel everything,